Welcome back to the IDP Heat Seeker Show. We brought the enthusiasm, we brought the energy. Craig's got his game face on tonight. We are going to do some tiers. You know we love doing tiers on Roto Heat's channel. If you are listening to this in podcast form after the fact, go over to Roto Heat's YouTube channel and you can see the tiers as we do it. If you are with us live in the chats, feel free to drop comments. We will get to those at the end of the show. And with that being said, tonight we wanted to play a little hypothetical game with you. So based on rotoheat.com, IDP rankings done by this dynamic trio of individuals, we are going to take about the top 15, 16 names, and we're going to try to project where we think they're going to go in rookie IDP drafts. So whether the first round, second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round of the upcoming rookie draft, not NFL draft, but rookie drafts. Just want to make sure that's clear so that nobody thinks that we are doing something that we're not. So with that being said, Austin, welcome back, my friend. How are you this lovely evening?
I'm great. How are you guys doing today?
I'm living
Splendid.
a Craig dream.
Amazing. Yeah, we're good. We're good. It's a Monday again, which, you know, as I said last week to you guys outside this, I was like, how many times do you get to say you're excited for a Monday? But definitely excited to be here today. Excited to share the show with you guys again, and hopefully we get some user questions at the end of the show, viewer questions, answer those. And this one's going to be a good one, actually. I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see how this goes. Mr. Reith, what's happening in your world? How are you, my friend?
I'm doing just great.
Bringing the enthusiasm I love and appreciate as always. That being said, so we are going to go down the list of the Roto Heat IDP rookie rankings, and we are going to try to put them in tiers. We are going to start off with Devin Lloyd, linebacker from Utah. Right now, he's projected as our top IDP rookie. Austin, where would you put him in? Now, so we have this going based on the Roto Heat IDP scoring. We can treat this as a one QB situation. We don't have to do super flex, but know that normally, at least in my experience, you know, first round, you don't see a lot of IDPs go. I mean, I don't know that if you guys maybe know, I don't even think Micah Parsons went first round. I know I took him in the second round in a few drafts. Craig, did you see any IDPs go first round over the last few years?
The short answer is no. So there's a league that I had helped start years ago, 12 years ago or something, that this format was sort of pulled from and tweaked with over the years. And going back to the first rookie draft, which I think would have been 2013, we've had one in that league rookie ever go in the first round, and that was Clowney. I think that was in 2013, maybe. Didn't completely pan out, but, you know, for good reason. Most of the time you don't see guys. And then, Brad, there's even another one that we're in that is sort of similar scoring. It's even boosted a bit more, the positionless league. And we didn't have any. It is super flex, so of course that is different. But I don't think we had anyone go until the end of the second round there. Jamin Davis went to the last pick of the second round. So I guess Parsons did go in the second round ahead of him. But still, the second round is usually your sweet spot for most IDP leagues that I've seen where guys start to go, and even then it's maybe like 2 or 3. So,
all right. So, Austin, I'll give you the first chance at it. Where are you putting Devin Lloyd? And then we will haze you and tell you why you're wrong.
Yeah, sure.
Where are you putting him at?
I'll probably put him I've definitely put him in the second round. If you want me to pick a spot, probably say somewhere in the middle of the second round would be my guess. He's not my top overall prospect IDP wise, but second round feels comfortable. He's a linebacker. He's going to get a lot of tackles. He's a great player in this class. Top 2 player for me. So I would have him in the second round.
Craig, would you concur that you would project him as a second round rookie pick?
yeah, I would expect in most 10 or 12 team leagues, he probably ends up going in single quarterback leagues in the second round somewhere. A lot of it is going to depend on, you know, sort of where he ends up. Brad prefaced it a bit. Draft capital and then team landing spot will matter for these guys, but for someone who's projected to be sort of in that middle to late first round of the real NFL draft, you'd kind of expect him to get immediate playing time, or maybe a little bit into the season start getting that, and people are going to see that and fall in love with that. We know linebackers usually sort of the top guys drafted, so that sort of area makes sense to me too.
Yeah. So in Just to play a little devil's advocate, is there a situation where you see a guy like a Devin Lloyd or any of the top backers, Nakobe Dean, Christian Harris, any Chad Muma, any of the guys that we think are probably first, second round picks? Is there a situation where it goes to where you're like, oh, I'm not drafting him second, third round like I thought? Like if he goes to a team that doesn't seem like a scheme fit, is there a situation, Austin, where you wouldn't take one of these guys as high as you're even projecting with like a Devin Lloyd?
Yeah, I mean, I could see moving them down or around if they're in a scheme that I don't really care for, or if maybe we know, in this case, Devin Lloyd, if he's a middle linebacker, he goes to a team where they've got an established middle linebacker like a Roquan Smith. I don't know why that would happen. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for any team to draft somebody like that and then have them sit behind somebody of that caliber. But in that situation, of course, I could see maybe drafting them 1 or 2 rounds later, for sure. It's possible.
Okay. Mr. Craig, number 2, Nakobe Dean, linebacker from Georgia. Is he another second rounder? Is he a third rounder? Where are you putting him at?
It's probably about the same sort of situation as Lloyd is. I mean, those are two, generally speaking, linebackers that you see, not counting edge guys. I'm talking about linebackers that you have going in that first round in the NFL draft. So again, it's the same sort of situation where he's probably going to be getting that draft capital. Someone's going to take him in the second round. And unless something, again, crazy happens between now and then, I think that's the right spot for him. But this is probably, if we're just talking about straight linebackers, the only 2 that I would have in that second round.
Well, and these are considerably different styles of linebacker. Lloyd is 6'3", 240-ish range. Nakobe Dean's 6 foot or under, depending on what you look at. And, in the 220 range. Very similar question to Lloyd, but does Dean go somewhere that doesn't fit his profile and his play style? And we know coming out he's a firecracker, very fast, very very sideline to sideline. Is there somewhere he goes that scares you away from drafting him in the second round?
I mean, you could craft any sort of situation for somebody to go a place where I wouldn't feel as comfortable drafting them, but someone's going to end up taking them in, the sort of leagues that we're talking about here, especially with what feels like this many questions about some of the offensive positions. I think you're going to have guys, especially in non-superflex leagues. I usually see a couple quarterbacks go in probably the second round. I think you're probably going to end up with fewer of those if you're in an IDP league. And I'm not saying it's going to bump these guys up to the start, but I think you'll see even more at the tail end of the second round when there's closer to balanced or higher scoring IDP leagues, that you're going to see more of those guys jump up into the second round. So someone's going to end up taking them in the second round in most of these sort of leagues is my guess.
So follow-up question with these 2, is there a spot within the second round? So are there offensive players that you think, I'd probably rather these 2 linebackers than X guy we think goes in the second round, whether it's one of the wide receivers that's injured, that's slipping, like a Mechie, or one of the running backs, that is kind of, we're not sure about, a James Cook or somebody like that's in the second round. Who is there somewhere there a sweet spot for you guys where we would want to start targeting? Because some rookie drafts are going to happen pre-NFL draft. Austin, I'll start with you on that. Is there a place in the second round where you think these 2 linebackers are kind of their sweet spot to start considering taking them in an IDP situation?
I mean, depending on the depth of the league, 10 teams, 12 teams, I would say yes, there is a sweet spot. And for me, it's pretty early, actually. I could see myself going Nakobe Dean at 201, honestly. I like Nakobe Dean. I think he could leapfrog Devin Lloyd in the rankings. I think he's a phenomenal linebacker. I like what he does. I like his ability to cover, his athleticism, along with his ability to make plays, tackles, things like that. So I definitely could see Nakobe Dean going early in the second round in the top 3, 4, 5 spots easily. And then Devin Lloyd, kind of a similar situation. Really, it's all about which one you like.
What about you, Mr. Craig? What do you think about that?
Yeah, for me, it really depends on the team that I have. If I'm a team that's gotten it through a trade or something where I'm sort of weak at linebacker, but I'm set at offense and I don't end up liking positions that a lot of these offensive guys go, and he goes to a great spot, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it really just depends on how you sort of look at your team, like I said, but then also how you go about the general position. I've sort of strayed away from drafting linebackers early on myself, unless I really feel they're in a perfect position, because I think you see a lot of situations, even this past year, you come with a lot of the top guys taken in the NFL draft. They don't have that immediate playing time necessarily, and then you can probably get them. I shouldn't even say probably, but you may be able to get them for cheaper than what that initial investment is, because the shine wears off. They don't play as much. Guy that took them, sees the nice new shining bright light, somewhere else off in the distance, and you can get them a little bit cheaper. And I'm not saying that's always going to happen, but we saw it with guys like, Devin Bush, where if you even just waited a year, you probably could have gotten him cheaper. And, if you still believe in him, you can get him even cheaper now, I would think, because he's not going to cost you, a high second round pick anymore, I don't think, in most leagues. So it really depends on how you go about it. But linebacker is something I tend to wait on more myself, because I think if you're not getting a surefire guy with that top 10 potential and you're sold on it, you can get fill-in guys cheaper at linebacker than other positions, I think.
Can't argue that. All right, Austin, back to you. Potential top 2 pick in the NFL draft, Aidan Hutchinson. Where do you think he lands in our upcoming rookie drafts?
This is tough because he's an edge rusher, defensive end. Although I will say I comp his game a lot to TJ Watt, his size, his speed, the way he plays, the power he has. So I could see him going in the second round as well. Although I will say probably well behind Devin Lloyd and Nakobe Dean both. So I would probably place him near the end of the second round. And I could see him going in the third round too. I got no problem with him going in the third.
Craig, to your side, what do you think about Aidan Hutchinson? Where do you project him somewhere in between round 2 or 3, or is he firm in 2 or 3?
I would think he probably goes, especially if he gets that top draft pick capital. A lot of people are expecting right now out there with mock drafts and all the scuttlebutt. I think he probably ends up being a second round pick for someone. If he would go to the Jaguars, I don't know how they wouldn't start him. It is the Jaguars, so who knows what happens. But with Urban Meyer out of there, I'd hope there was a little bit more common sense. Be him and Josh Allen. I would think he goes in the second round myself.
So just for fun, he projects better as a hand in the dirt 4-3 defensive end. But what if he goes to a 3-4 team that wants to have him kind of rush off the edge, and in my mind that caps his value. But what do you guys think about that? Do you think this doesn't matter? He's not scheme dependent, or do you think he would be better suited in a 4-3 versus a 3-4, Austin?
I actually think that plays into his hand. I thought he rushed really well off the edge. I thought that that's one of the things that he was exceptionally good at, despite being smaller than some of the other guys in this draft. We look at Kayvon Thibodeaux, for instance, who's just an absolute giant in comparison. I think Aidan Hutchinson will be fine off the edge if he was schemed in like that. I wouldn't say it would cap his value. He's a phenomenal player off the edge or off ball. So I wouldn't say it would cap his value.
What say you, Mr. Craig?
I prefer myself with his hand in the dirt, sort of playing that way. The only reason it may cap his value, if you want to talk about initially here, is I really didn't see him getting the sort of coverage reps that a full-time starter being out there is going to need to go out and do. Is it something he could do? I mean, we've seen that even with offensive players before, where they're not necessarily out there doing something all the time in college. So the belief is, they can't do it, like Jonathan Taylor and catching passes. Just because you haven't seen them do it in college a lot doesn't mean they can't. It leaves more up as far as question marks. But certainly, if he would go to a team like that, it's still going to be high in the draft. And I would have to think that they're comfortable with him, that he can grow into that aspect. So immediate returns, yeah, I think it would cap his value. But could he end up doing it? Yeah, perhaps. I'm not going to sit here and say he can't, because he's more of an athlete than I could ever imagine to be. So,
probably more of an athlete than any of us. All right. So next up is arguably my favorite IDP in this draft, Kyle Hamilton, safety, Notre Dame. Craig, where do you think he goes, and what do you think about his prospects?
I think with the way that things are going in the NFL with safeties, with them not getting that a lot of them that first round draft capital that even people thought that they might. I think he probably falls farther in the draft than a lot of us IDP nerds or people that do mock drafts are thinking right now, especially with the news that came out that he probably ran closer to a 4.7 in his pro day, and just the way, again, teams are valuing safeties. And I think that can end up translating to rookie drafts where similarly, I don't see as many safeties going very high. So it wouldn't surprise me, even though I think he's a great prospect and he probably had a great career in the NFL, and that play speed that people talk about not being the same as that straight line speed, that no matter how many times we tell ourselves not to fall in love with it, everyone in the world seems to like, oh, he ran a slow 40. Well, we know that that isn't necessarily the same thing as when you're out there playing. Draft-wise, I think he probably ends up being like a third-round pick. Yeah, he could sneak into the second round, but to me, I'm thinking he's probably a third-round pick for our drafts.
What do you think, Austin?
I would probably echo what Craig said. And, the testing for me, based on what I saw on film, didn't take a whole lot away from him. Yes, you would have liked to saw him test better. But I will say, I'd like to see safeties that are able to play more in the box. His size does kind of concern me. He's very long and tall, but he's not very thick. And we saw him make some tackles and make some plays and things like that. He does seem to play physical at the college level, but I like to see how he does in the pros and how some of that translates to the pros. I could see him being the type of safety who is a ball hawk. He has great ball skills, and he could get some interceptions and create some turnovers and things like that, maybe score some points that way versus being a tackle heavy guy. However, I'm not going to invest a lot on a safety without knowing for sure that he's that guy. So with some of the reservations that I have with Kyle Hamilton, I would say comfortably in the third round is where I would place him.
Understandable. So the other dynamic that, and when we're talking about knowing your league and knowing your scoring, typically roto scoring wise, you get more points for interceptions, touchdowns. I mean, some of the bigger play stuff. Does that factor into the equation when you're deciding if you want to go chasing a linebacker that you're pretty sure will get you a bunch of tackles versus, a safety or, or somebody that could get you more interceptions, more touchdowns? Does that factor in a lot for you, or do you want to go with kind of the safer floor when it comes to IDPs, Craig?
Both, which I know isn't a good answer for safety. So
Did you just
I like players that are ball hawks. I've always liked guys like that. And to me, I mean, go back Honey Badger. He's a guy that he didn't go crazy high in the NFL draft because of issues, and he also sort of fell in rookie drafts. Guy like this past year, Javon Holland, I kind of felt that way about him. Andre Sisco, who we didn't really see a whole lot this year, had that same sort of level in college, but even 2 years ago, I think, Antoine Winfield Jr., I remember when we were doing our rookie stuff before, and I was the highest out of the three of us at that time, the other guy that was on with us. And you and he had questions about his size and all that. And I said, look, he makes plays. He has that pedigree. He knows how to track to the ball. And even if he doesn't get you an interception, passes defended will get you points. It's the same as a tackle. So there's value in that. So I do like guys that are ball hawks, but I don't think you can sit there and project, oh, he's going to be an interception machine, because that's just so highly variable for most players. And even the good players that do get you interceptions, it varies a lot from year to year. And I don't think you can really count on those points by and large.
What say you, Mr. Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. And I would just also say that we're talking about the NFL. So, these guys are playing against the elite of the elite at quarterback. It's really hard for me to say, yeah, this guy in college, he generated a ton of turnovers. He's going to go to the league and do the same thing. I would much rather see a guy that has the ability to, again, be physical, play all over the field, be moved up into the box, and have that safer floor. That's for me personally. But I would say, for a guy like Aidan Hutchinson, it's kind of, I guess I'm on the opposite end of that, where he's a guy that I think could get to the quarterback and create, lots of big points by getting sacks. So I would go for him because I think that he has that upside. So it really just kind of depends on the position and the player. I guess it would be case by case. So sort of what along the lines of what Craig said. It's a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. I like it. All right. Well, A little bit of both. We are now going to talk Kayvon Thibodeaux, defensive end, edge, depending on your league. Austin, where do you project him? Where do you feel comfortable going after him?
So we talked a little bit before the show about what we look at on film versus what we see in testing. And when we see somebody who's really great on film and they don't test the way we want them to, how far do we move them down? For me, it's not very much. I'm more of a film guy. I will say Kayvon Thibodeaux's film was good, particularly good. But I thought I liked Aidan Hutchinson's a little better, so I had him ahead of Kayvon Thibodeaux. One thing I will say though is his testing. Guy ran what was it, like a 4.5? That's insanity. So I've got him moving up. I've got him comfortably in the second round. If you've got Hutchinson, I've got Thibodeaux in the second round as well. So,
well, and you hear a lot of the folks, the pundits, scouts, talk about the inconsistency of Kayvon is what's keeping him kind of lower than Aidan. Because Aidan's, but even at that, look at some of the bigger games. I mean, Hutchinson still was shut down. I mean, think about Georgia, things like that. There were times where it looked like he had disappeared. I mean, all defensive ends, have spurts where, they just don't have it and they're getting shut down by the edge or by the tackle on the edge there. But, they're both very athletic and very talented defensive ends. Craig, how do you feel about Thibodeaux and kind of where are you putting him at?
So just in terms of sort of edge rushers, he going into the whole draft evaluation process here, January on that we've been sort of working on here at Roto Heat as far as studiously working on it. Thibodeaux came into as my top edge guy and he remains my top edge guy. And I know Hutchinson last year when we were going through this, because we wasn't really sure when we started. So that would have been 2 years ago before the draft, before Hutchinson decided to go back to Michigan. The comp I had for him is sort of like a Cam Hayward type of guy, because I think that's the best sort of, he's a big guy that can get down there and stay in the dirt and just make plays for you consistently over time. And I think if you want a guy with a long time high floor, I think that's going to be Hutchinson. But if you're going for a ceiling with a guy that can just be sort of what people had hoped Clowney maybe someday, not that Thibodeaux will be that, but it has that same sort of feeling with it. He's just an electric player that's going to be able to go out there and just make those huge plays for you. There may be a little bit more inconsistency. We'll have to see. But ceiling wise, I like Thibodeaux more. And if I had to take one of the two, I would take him. So he's definitely in round 2 for me.
I like it. Fun. Okay, so next up would be to you, Craig, and that would be David Ojabo, the now unfortunately injured defensive end from Michigan. Does he slide in the NFL draft and in rookie drafts in your mind?
I mean, it's all speculation because we don't really know what teams are thinking, but based on the rumors that get spilled out and the secrets get leaked and all that sort of stuff, he probably was going to be in the top half of the NFL draft, and now it sounds like there's a good chance he could slide into day 2. We've seen teams sort of trade up for guys, even that might be injured and have some time before they can play, get into the back of the first round because you get that 5th-year option, all that sort of fun stuff. So that could happen. I think he probably goes in the second round of the NFL draft, and I mean the injury I think just does drop you. Probably in fantasy leagues too, because a lot of people don't like to put an IDP on the IR right away. Most leagues have limited IR spots. 3rd, 4th round, somewhere in there. I mean, if I was a contending team that didn't really have a lot of holes to fill and I could stash him on IR and be fine with it and hope for the best, I'd probably be fine taking him in the 3rd round, but I probably wouldn't take him in the 3rd round myself at this point in most leagues.
Austin, what do you say about that?
I'm glad you agree. I'm right there with you. 4th round for me, although I will say he's a guy that could have a great return for you if you're just patient enough. Take him in the 4th round. He's the one guy on this list that I think could give you the best return if you ask me to just pick one. Despite these other guys that we've talked through so far in this episode, they're all elite talents, should project well to the NFL and translate well. But David Ojabo is a guy that you can get later and could give you a really good return on that investment. So I've got him in the 4th as well. I think the injury definitely does hurt him, not only in the NFL draft, but certainly in fantasy drafts as well.
Yeah, he's in just to add on to what you guys are saying, in my mind, he was one of those guys that I probably I don't want to say even before the injury, but, probably even before the injury, because a lot of people are projecting him as kind of a 3-4 outside linebacker. And when I look at the teams and the needs, I was okay even letting him slide even further. I mean, and quite honestly, if you went to a team as a 3-4 edge guy, I probably wasn't going to draft him this year just because they were going to need to get him up to speed, because he hit all of his career, a little bit that he's been playing edge rusher, with his hand in the dirt and not standing up. And it may not be that big a difference, but it's enough of a difference that I would rather let him struggle as a rookie or, a second-year guy and then try to buy him on the cheap instead of wasting a draft pick when I could take a flyer on a wide receiver running back, throw him on the taxi squad and see if they blow up. So I'm with you guys. I was, as we were prepping, I was probably putting him 4th, 5th round was in my mind.
So the Michigan guy doesn't have faith in him. That makes me feel great.
Michigan's been up and down in their producing of people. I mean, I believe in Kayvon, so I still think there's something there, but hasn't really been healthy enough to show much. So, and even Aidan, I mean, I like Hutchinson a lot. I think he's a safe floor play of the two edge guys, but even at that, I would rather let somebody else take the chance on him if my roster even is remotely fine at defensive end. So,
on one hand, if you think. I was going to say, on one hand, if you're in your draft and you think Ojabo is 4th round is going to be overdrafting him, and if that's your evaluation, your personal evaluation, then wait till the 5th and see if he's there. And then if he is, and you're able to get him, and you're happy with that, then be happy with that. So I could see it on both hands. Like on one hand, if you're gonna, if somebody's going to overdraft him compared to where you have him, let him do it. But if he's there and you got him in the 5th, take him in the 5th and run with it.
What were you going to say, Craig?
I was going to say, Brad, you're just going to wait for that Rashawn Gary 3rd-year breakout for Ojabo and then try to get him?
We'll keep waiting. All right. So, Austin, it is back to you, and it is Chad Muma, linebacker. What do you make of him? This is the Craig Reith special here. Special player, special talent. Is he a high draft pick?
Yeah, he's got a high motor. He's a special talent. He racks up the tackles. He seems to always be in position. He's a high football IQ guy. I would have him in the 3rd round. I really, really like Chad Muma.
You talked him up, and then you said, yeah, middle of the draft.
Yeah, well, I mean, the 2nd round for me, as far as IDP goes, is really reserved for the elite of the elite. I would say, you're probably overdrafting him, taking him in the 2nd, but in the 3rd round, he's a guy you should be pretty excited to land if you don't land one of the top 2 linebackers we've already talked about.
Craig, do you agree 3rd round?
Yeah.
The follow-up question is this the next Anthony Barr as well to you, Craig?
No. Although, I mean, the whole thing about Anthony Barr, really, are you going to go to a team that's going to utilize you and not sort of misplace you for most of your career? I mean, I think Anthony Barr, if he goes to a different team and he isn't just shoved there as a 3-4 sort of, outside guy on the Vikings, he could have had a very different career. I mean, he was a smart, athletic guy that, I mean, to me, he was miscast, and now most of his career is behind him. So could that happen? That certainly could. But the sort of high effort guys that may not, be the most talented with their God-given gifts and all that sort of stuff, like Muma, sometimes it feels like they get forgotten because they're not as flashy. And he went to Wyoming. It's not one of these big crazy name schools where everyone's seeing him week in and week out. So I certainly think you could end up getting a value with him in the 3rd round there. Yeah, and I think that is the sweet spot for him.
Yeah, linebacker is a fun position in fantasy to draft, because if you hit on one in those middle rounds, I mean, that could return a huge huge return on the investment for you. And Moom is one of those guys that feels like they could be that next huge return on the investment type player.
He reminds me, and I know like size-wise and all that, it's not the same thing, but he reminds me years ago of Chris Borland, from out of Wisconsin, who didn't play very long because he decided the CTE wasn't worth playing. But a guy that I think he was taken in the 3rd round too, that just ended up being an amazing linebacker for 2 years or whatever, and he had a great career ahead of him if he kept playing. But sort of that high effort guy that is just smart and knows where to be and knows how to play the game.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Mr. Austin, back to you. Jaquan Brisker, safety, Penn State. What do you think about him? Where are you putting him?
Yeah, Jaquan Brisker is a really good safety in this class. Obviously, not our top safety. I don't. He's probably third on our list that I have. So yeah, I'd probably say third or fourth round for me, depending on where he goes. I mean, he'll get decent draft capital for a safety. So depending on where he goes in the draft, third or fourth round, I'll say fourth. Say fourth.
Craig, what do you think about that? Are you leaving him in the fourth round, or are you chasing him somewhere earlier?
Yeah, I mean, for these safeties, landing spot and potential playing time is going to matter so much. We saw it last year, especially with a lot of safeties taken in that sort of second and third round, and how many of them ended up being really relevant for fantasy football purposes this past year and getting playing time. And there was like one safety, well, two. You got Holland, who actually played and did well, and then Trayvon Mulrig, who played a lot, but just with how he's used in that Raiders defense, he didn't get you a whole lot in terms of fantasy points. And the rest of them just didn't play a whole lot, and when they didn't do a whole lot. So I think sometimes there's a lot higher of a learning curve for those people. And I like Brisker. I think I don't have my rankings memorized. Everybody can go send me hate mail on Twitter or something about it. I think I have him as my second safety, so I do like him. He's second or third. But yeah,
he's your second safety.
Not being completely sure how all this stuff pans out, I'd probably be comfortable in the fourth round.
Yeah, Brisker, the funny thing is he's not, I mean, he's our second or third or, ish safety when it comes to our rankings, but he feels like the one that when I personally watched him, feels like the one that could be the best one in this class, just because I feel like a team could use him as a nickel corner and a blitzer and in coverage, and in man. Like he feels very like he's not scheme, and I don't want to say any of the other guys are scheme dependent per se, but he feels like one that you can use all over the formation and has shown enough speed and enough intelligence to just kind of be a do-it-all guy. So every time I look at my rankings, I'm like, Kyle Hamilton is still my favorite safety in this class. But then I keep going, man, Brisker really needs to be in that conversation as the best safety in this class, because I think whatever team gets him could start him day one and do all sorts of stuff with him, and he'd be successful. Get you sacks, get you interceptions, get you, whatever. And it's like, man, I feel like we're sleeping on him, but we're not really sleeping on him because we still have him as one of our top safeties. So we're thinking fourth round.
Well, the other thing to remember, Hamilton could be the best safety in terms of NFL career and accolades and all that when all is said and done. Well, Brisker could still end up being a better fantasy player for the first 3 years of their career or something like that too. We see, especially in secondaries and maybe more so with cornerback, but just because you're one of the top players at your position doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be one of the top fantasy players. And I think linebacker, defensive end, you usually see more of a correlation, where secondary, you don't necessarily see that. So it's worth monitoring. Yeah.
Yeah, last year, Andre Sisco and Richie Grant were kind of those guys that I thought were just exceptional talents that, you wouldn't have to overpay for. And you saw how those panned out. They, just didn't get enough playing time, didn't get enough opportunity. So it's like you got to wait for them. And that's not necessarily to say that they were bad picks, but, because they still have time to develop. But what I will say is that if I'm forced to choose between third or fourth round, I wouldn't tell anybody to overpay. So, draft them where you're comfortable, and keep in mind that sometimes with the secondary players, they don't always just jump right into the starting roles.
Yeah, and that actually springs up a more interesting conversation about drafting IDPs that aren't going to start year one. And obviously there's a lot of factors that go into it. League size, starting positions, all of that. But if you are pretty sure a guy's not going to start year one, do you draft him at all? Or do you draft him late for taxi squad? I mean, I put IDPs on my taxi squad, but most of my leagues that aren't extremely deep, like my more basic IDP leagues, guys won't put IDPs on their taxi squad. They don't even worry about it. They just hit the waiver wire or try to make a trade. Craig, do you think for some of the not so large IDP leagues, if you don't think a guy is going to start, are you not even going to touch him, or would you recommend not touching him at all?
At a certain point in the draft, if a first round pick linebacker or edge guy is sitting out there not being taken and you're getting to the 4th or 5th round, I think there is, just for if you can hold on to him for that training camp hype if something starts popping, and then even if you don't want him necessarily on your team, trading him away, if you can get him in a 3rd round pick to get a wide receiver in the 2nd you couldn't get, or something like that you want, I'm fine doing that. And this is where it's a weak spot for me because I don't play a whole lot of redraft. Last year was my first IDP redraft league in years, and I'm in another one sort of this year where it's you keep 5 IDP guys out of your sort of full starting 11 or 12. But the rest of mine are by and large leagues with deep benches. So it's good to play in a variety of leagues and sort of get that thought process in. But yeah, I don't know that you're really going to know for a lot of these guys until after or right at the end of training camp, because we saw guys taken in the 1st round last year that didn't do much of anything with Davis and Collins, who everyone got so excited. They're top 20 picks. There's places they can line up and play right away, and circumstances dictated that they just didn't, whether they weren't ready or teams were competing for a title, stuff like that, or Washington thought they would be until things happened. So yeah, it's hard sometimes. If you look at the top 3 rounds of linebackers, you had Parsons, Bolton, Diablo towards the end of the year, and then JOK when he was healthy for the second half of the year. But besides that, out of what you had 8 sort of inside-ish, if you just wanted to group those guys, non-edge linebackers, and you had 3 of them really make an impact. I mean, that's rough. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that really does mess up your rookie draft if you're banking on these guys giving you value when they don't. Austin, I'll throw that question over to you. Is there a point in the drafts where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to let these guys go and not even worry about it because I don't think they're going to play? Or do you, like Craig, throw them on your tax squad, hope they pop, and trade them off?
Yeah, so I mean, the short and sweet of it would just be it's all based on evaluation and probably position. I'm glad Craig mentioned Zaven Collins because I think he's a shining example of a guy that ended up in a spot who didn't get as much playing time as we had all hoped and probably got overdrafted based on his playing time in year 1. However, I will say if you've got Zaven Collins right now, you're probably feeling pretty good heading into year 2, hoping he'll see some more opportunities. So, and he's a great player. So when I look at guys like him, or like I mentioned Richie Grant, I had mentioned Andre Cisco, who was a personal favorite of mine, and those evaluations to me, I really liked those guys. But if your league is not deep enough for that, I would not recommend drafting those guys. I would certainly recommend waiting on those guys and maybe picking them up for a lot cheaper. Maybe taking a flyer on a receiver or running back who may pan out for you. So that would be my recommendation.
I like it. All right, Craig, to you, George Karlaftis, defensive end from Purdue. What are you doing with him? Where are you putting him at?
he's sort of more of a old school throwback type of edge player where I think he kind of needs to be down there as a defensive end. I don't think there's probably a whole lot of movement for him to be an outside linebacker or probably even kick inside. So I think his position out of the people we've talked about is really set. If you had to pick one of them, he probably falls to the 4th round for me. I mean, it's one of those things, excitement, and then I also don't necessarily see him getting the draft capital and that starting position that's going to excite people right off the bat. And for me, where I'd be comfortable taking him is probably the mid to late 4th round.
Yeah, I get a very like Jared Allen, hardworking, kind of everyman type vibe from him when I think about what he can be at the next level. He's going to come in, he's going to give you everything he got, and in the right scheme, that'll probably give you a really nice, productive defensive end. That doesn't always work out that way, but that's kind of where I'm at with him. Austin, where are you at with Karlaftis? Is he a 4th rounder for you too?
Probably a solid 4th rounder, I would say. He's going to get the draft capital, I would think, to put him in an immediate role. Defensive end, especially, is hard to come by. A guy like him, as talented as he is, as strong, powerful as he is off the edge. He's a great run stopper. He should be able to get to the ball well, potentially even to the quarterback. He's not as fast as some of these other guys and as athletic, but very, very powerful. And he should see a starting role. But yeah, he's a traditional defensive end, and those guys typically have less value for me. So I would say 4th round. And if you want to go later, maybe you can get him later. But 4th round feels pretty comfortable.
I like it. I like it.
If I had to throw out a comp, because again I hate comps, but I know people love them. Of a more relevant one than Jared Allen, perhaps. I mean, like Sam Hubbard is kind of what he feels to me, where he's at. Yeah, I know you know who Jared Allen is, but you're 50 years old or whatever, Brad. So
I'll say Jared Allen might come to your house and be like, "Listen, I'm relevant." All right.
To these newer IDP folks, I mean, IDP is a niche thing to begin with, and then a lot of people, you're expecting to know who a big name was 15 years ago or something.
Great.
If he ends up being half a Jared Allen, I think he'll be happy with his career. So
I'll tell you what, if he's Jared Allen, just go ahead and put him in the 2nd for me. Jared Allen was able to get to the quarterback as well as anybody.
But remember, it took him a little bit of time. He wasn't an immediate thumper. I mean, it took him a minute.
Fair enough.
So where are you taking Jared Allen in this draft, Brad?
I'm not, because he's 50 years old now. So I don't want a 50-year-old defensive end on my team. Speaking of 50-year-old defensive ends, which we're not going to be, we're going the opposite. We're going with 23-year-old Jermaine Johnson. Austin, what are you doing with this defensive end that had to transfer a few times to really make an impact? Is he going to make an impact at the next level, and are you taking him early or no?
He's really talented. He should get good draft capital as well. Good rusher off the edge, strong. Again, he's very athletic. Probably in the 4th round for me, but I could probably go 5th round on him as well. So I'll say 5th. I'm going to go 5th.
What say you, Craig? Is that madness to you, or are you fine with that?
It feels about right. He fits into that sort of new mold of guys that we're talking about, and why that sort of edge position even really exists, where he can do both sort of things, and you're not really sure which one you want to put him at if you're an NFL team, I think, because you see he has that ability to go put his hand in the dirt, stand up and play that sort of outside linebacker where he could, drop into the flat to go after running back or something like that, because he has that higher level of athleticism than your traditional defensive end, sort of like we just talked about with George. It also offers more questions, I think, to me about, all right, where's he going? What's he going to be able to do? And how much of an immediate impact are you going to have? Because we've seen some guys this past year, like a guy like Aziz, who fell to, I think it was the 2nd round, to the Giants, and it took a while for him to really get up to speed, and then he started to show some flashes. But you can probably also wait on guys like that, because there's a lot of adjustment to that speed factor in the NFL, like we've talked about. So 4th, 5th round, anything like that, it's really going to be your, which one of these super athletic edge type of guys do you fall in love with? And that's probably the one you want to take a stab at in the 4th round. Otherwise, the 5th round feels right.
Does this guy give you Gregory Rousseau vibes? Like, I feel like he's except it's kind of the opposite through the draft process. Jermaine Johnson all of a sudden showed up, Senior Bowl. Everyone got excited during the draft process, but I feel like this is a guy that I'm undervaluing that could make it and all of a sudden be successful year one, when I don't know that I see it. It took him jumping all over the place to finally get to a spot where he could get some heavy playing time. Like, I don't know that this guy pushes anybody for immediate playing time on a team that has, a solid edge on one side and then kind of the run stuffing edge on the other side. Like, I just don't know where this guy fits for immediate production. I mean, I'm fine with the 5th round grade. For me, it's 5th round or undrafted, at least until I can see what the NFL does with him. But Austin, is there a situation where, who do you comp him to, and what do you think of him early on? Does he push somebody for playing time quickly?
Yeah, I think Rousseau is a pretty good comp for him. I know Craig loves comps as well. So I think that's a decent comp, but yeah, I mean, I don't think Ojolari is as good of a comp. I thought Aziz was, more fit for an outside linebacker than an edge rusher. Didn't really have the size to line up, as you guys said, and put their hand in the dirt, line up inside. and just go use his size to just dominate somebody. I thought where he excelled was his athleticism and power that way, and then also just being able to be in coverage. So I don't think Jermaine Johnson necessarily has those same traits. I don't think that would be as good of a comp, but I would probably say, like you guys said, as high as I would take him is the 4th round, and that's just if my eval falls in love with him and he ends up in a perfect spot or a perfect scenario. But again, you just got to see what the NFL does with him in the draft, what team he goes to, what that what that situation looks like, if there's a path to playing time for him, or if he's a guy that you may just have to stash or just not draft at all and grab later at a lower value.
Speaking of a guy, Christian Harris, linebacker, Alabama, Craig. What are you doing with him? Where are you putting him at? And it is true, you hate comps. What's your comp for Christian Harris?
I don't have one for him. I do not have a comp for everybody. I think I've used up my comp quota probably for the next month here, because I don't have one for every player. Because I if it doesn't sort of like jump out to me with a feeling of when I see a guy like, he's got shades of this or that, I tend not to do him, because I think at that point you're stretching for him. Harris, it'll be interesting to see it. It kind of feels like right now people are saying he's going to be a day. Yeah, because the draft is 3 days now. I still go back to the days when the draft was Saturday and Sunday, and I was in college. I could sit around drinking all day, just watch the entire rounds and talking about it. And now they've stretched it to it. I got to take off of work Thursday and Friday to be able to get my full draft experience. Not that I'm drinking all day, because I'd be out for a month if I was doing that. But I think it's really going to depend on where he goes, because we've even seen guys go to what feels like a good situation, like Pete Werner, and maybe he got some playing time at the end of the year and looked all right, but just didn't do a whole lot. And before him, it was the same sort of thing with Zach Bond, where it's like, oh, he went to a great situation to get playing time, take him in a 4th round pick or something like that, and it just doesn't do anything. So even if he gets the draft capital, I'd really want to see what team he goes to, and that could bump him up to a 4th round pick. But to me, I'm stashing him probably in the 5th round myself.
Yeah, it's tough with him. And I'm not saying I love comps, but I do try to do comps very similar, where does this guy look like a similar type player, to give me an idea of what I'm working with, or what potential could be working with, to try to project what I would hope, for this player. And Harris, being undersized, I mean, what is he, 6 foot? Like, he's under 6'1", I believe, and like in the 220s. And it's so hard, when I try to nail down what to make of him. And I'm not sure until I see what defense he goes to, if I'm really comfortable drafting him at all with the other linebackers in this draft class. And quite honestly, as we get to 3, 4, and 5, there's plenty of wide receivers and some tight ends that I wouldn't mind stashing to see how they develop, because maybe they didn't get used a lot in college, like an Isaiah Likely, at a situation that they didn't get used a lot. There's tons of other players where I'm like, if I've got Christian Harris up against, any number of guys, I'm like, I'm probably going that other guy. Austin, are you a 4th, 5th round guy? What do you think about Harris?
Yeah, probably. I mean, if you want to give him positional value at just because he's a linebacker, you could potentially take him in the 4th. And if he's a guy that you believe in, I would say 5th. And, I think what kind of scares me is he has shades of, and again, we don't want to use a necessarily direct comp, but he has shades of, not just because he's from Alabama, Dylan Moses. Dylan Moses obviously had an injury, but he kind of reminds me, he kind of gives me that vibe, that Dylan Moses vibe. And I'm just not sure I'm 100% in on Christian Harris. He's got some good qualities to his game. We've seen him make some incredible plays, tackles, hard hitting linebacker. He seems to fly around the ball, can move well, but he's not as complete as some of these other guys. So I would kind of say 5th round is a pretty good area, where if I could get him in the 5th, I'd probably be pretty happy with that, and him being a linebacker.
All right. Follow up to you. Lewis Cine, where are you sending him to? What round are you doing, Austin?
So he's my 2nd safety overall. I do have him ahead of Jaquan Brisker, although I would say, this one's tough. I know. Probably 4th round. Because, again, it just goes back to when I'm placing these guys, if I'm giving advice to someone and someone's watching this show right now and they're going, where should I try to get these guys? The last thing I want to do is tell you to overspend on someone and draft someone higher than you should and waste a pick. Fourth round, if you can get them there, be happy with that. But again, if Lewis Cine is a guy that you just fell in love with and you think that based on your scoring and the depth of your league that he could go in the third, take him in the third.
What say you, Craig? How you feeling about him? And where
Yeah, if he went to a situation like we said where it looks like he's really going to get into immediate playing time and has a chance to produce well, and the first thought that comes to mind for me is like if he went to the Steelers to be the other guy alongside Fitzpatrick there, with the sort of question marks that they have with their middle linebackers, I think that could be a great spot where with how we all sort of like him as, that second or third rated safety for maybe all of us. Again, I don't have these memorized, but in that area, I think that'd be a great spot. And yeah, certainly you could see him jump up somewhere to the third round or something like that. But the fourth round feels right to me as well at the moment.
All right. So back to you, Trayvon Walker, the defensive end that is everybody's darling come draft season. Where are you putting him and what are you doing with him? Mr. Craig, sorry.
He's still one of those fourth round guys to me until I know where he's going and what he's doing. He's a little bit different that I could see a team wanting him just because of what he's shown to put on a little weight and just be used all across the entire defensive line in different situations, like shove him inside on passing downs and stuff. Otherwise, keep him outside. And I think he could do that well too. I don't think he's necessarily immediately coming to mind as a guy you want to do that with. But again, I'm not a professional here by any means. So I'm not as in love with him. He's, again, one of those guys that's in that group of super athletic guys that I think can do a lot depending on the scheme that they go to. And I'm putting those all in the fourth round right now without having any more information.
We aren't professionals. We just play him on YouTube TV. Austin, Leo Chenal, what are you doing with this linebacker and where are you slotting him in at?
I like him a lot. He's a guy that's going to get a ton of tackles for you. I would probably place him in the fourth round. I like him probably a little bit better than Christian Harris. I think his ability to make tackles and be around the ball are, the thing about him that I was worried about with his size was his speed. Would he be a liability in coverage, and what would his snap count look like? What would his snap percent look like? But then he tested, and he was one of those guys that I liked pretty well on film, and then he tested well, and I thought maybe there's a shot. I did look at his PFF grades in coverage, and I will say they were not great. But I just don't understand. So he tested so well. He ran a great 40 time for his size. That is incredible. I think he was a 4.5 guy as well. So I like him, and I'm going to keep him in the fourth round.
Oh, but remember how Wisconsin's defense is deployed. A lot of those linebackers they're sending up to be run stoppers, to go after the quarterback, to get in the backfield. So, dropping back in coverage isn't always the forefront of the teaching there at Wisconsin.
Yeah, so I haven't closed the book on him, but I'll say if he's able to play well in coverage at that size and just being able to go sideline to sideline and make those tackles, I like him.
Craig, any concerns? Chenal at fourth round?
If I had to bump someone up out of this fourth round group to be a for sure third rounder, if we all had to pick someone, he'd be the one just because, again, he's a linebacker, but two, what we've seen out of him as far as what he put on tape and then how he tested out. And where I think he's going to get draft capital, I could see him, when it's all said and done, being a third rounder.
Okay. All right. So at this point, I've lost track of who did that one first. Daxton Hill, Austin, where are you putting him at?
Daxton Hill's somebody I think a lot of people have fallen in love with more than I have personally. I would have him in the fifth round. Just a simple answer. I like him.
Craig?
He's good, but fifth round.
He probably ends up, and you know this more than I did. It seems like it's Michigan show every other player here tonight. He'll probably end up
They're
being
kind
more
of
of
a
a
big
free
deal.
safety in the NFL, which just historically doesn't get you as many fantasy points too. So at 5th round, we aren't disagreeing a whole lot here tonight, and we're gonna have to poke the bear and Brad or something, make fun of these Michigan guys. But yeah, I mean, 5th round for me for Hill.
You can make fun of them all you want. If they just keep winning, I guess it doesn't really matter. I mean, this is the first year where they've been winning.
This is the NFL we're talking about. I don't care what they win in college.
Right. Very true. Very true. Well, you can't poke the Bears cage about Michigan. They're never going to be an NFL team.
I'm a college football agnostic. I don't have a team that I care about, so you're not going to get it out of me.
Before we cover Drake Jackson here, and we're talking about Michigan as a team, but I just want to look at Georgia's defense and all the elite prospects and high-end prospects that they're putting into the NFL, guys that are projected to go so high. Do you think at some point we're going to find out that maybe one or two of these guys were just benefactors of playing with guys who are exceptional? I mean, some of this is going to sort itself out, right? Like you guys kind of feel that way, and do you guys have any opinions on who that might be?
I don't have a guess as to who it is, but I certainly think you see that, and we've seen that at other positions and teams before. Like, one of the things for years was you don't take a linebacker from Alabama because they just don't pan out being that sort of 3-down stud. And we sort of talked about with Harris, he's a great college player. Dylan Moses, even more so, amazing high school player, great college player for a few years. And he was undrafted, right, as a priority UDFA to the Jaguars last year.
Yep. Yeah.
So, yeah, I certainly think you are going to see that. And especially with Georgia, it feels like it's someone along this defensive line. But who it is, yeah, I have no good guess as to who it's going to be, but it does feel that way to me too.
Well, and you, in my mind, it's the guys behind the edge rushers, behind the defensive linemen, because they're getting to the quarterbacks, causing the pressure and leaving it, making the linebackers look good. So in my mind, I worry about those linebackers, those safeties, because the edge guys, the defensive linemen. I mean, think about Georgia. Jordan Davis, although we're not going to talk about him on here, at least this episode, Jordan Davis wreaked havoc in the backfield. Monster, massive, athletic guy with, Trayvon Walker, with all these other pieces in that defense. So those linebackers and safeties, it's easy. They're just cleaning up after the havoc's already been wrecked. I mean, right? So that's my concern, would be the linebackers and the safeties. Or if you have two stud defensive ends, one of them is the guy and the other one is lucky. I mean, think about Michigan's situation with Hutchinson and Ojabo. Maybe the other one's a benefactor because they're double teaming the other side. I mean, and that's the tough thing, is the NFL has to sort that out. True story. All right, last but not least, Drake Jackson. Mr. Craig, where are you putting him at?
4th, 5th round, same sort of thing, like I said, about as far as these edge guys. I mean, I don't have any strong feelings about him as far as what he's going to be in the fantasy football space, except he's probably going to be another guy that's going to take a few years to get sorted out with where he goes, and then being productive there enough to make a difference, even if you have an edge position as opposed to a defensive line, outside linebacker, wherever he ends up. So again, it's probably a little cheap, but he isn't sort of in that upper echelon enough to be a 2nd or 3rd round sort of guy that I'm willing to put a pick out on the line that high up for, where 4th or 5th round, especially for these IDP guys, there are a lot less definitive things about them than some of these late round running backs or wide receivers, where it's like, all right, this guy, he's just going to be a pass catching back in the NFL. All right, I know what his place is. I know what I'm getting with him. So yeah, 4th, 5th, something like that.
And that's the tough thing. You run into this situation where it's like, when you're putting these guys up to some of the offensive players, which direction do you go? I mean, Jackson figures to be kind of a 3-4 guy. And if they use him off the edge at 6'2"-ish, 250-ish pounds, I'm like, I don't know if I love that. I would rather see him in a different spot. But awesome. I'll give you the final thoughts on Drake Jackson. Where are you at with him?
I really liked him when I watched his film. I really liked his, the way he used his hands and the way he was able to beat defenders, or I guess not defenders, but offensive tackles, the way he was able to work off the edge and just get to the quarterback. So he's actually a guy that I was like really excited about when I watched film. I was like, wow, that was really impressive. He does play in the Pac-12, so there is that. But I will say 5th round feels pretty comfortable for him. I mean, I guess if you've got Jermaine Johnson in the 5th, you probably should have Drake Jackson in the 5th. I don't see any way you could move him over Jermaine Johnson up to the 4th. So 5th round, potentially undrafted, wait and see. It's one of those guys, again, we've talked already on the episode about Gregory Rousseau and how he landed in Buffalo, and all the cards just kind of fell right for him. For Drake Jackson, I think something similar would have to happen for him to even really be drafted comfortably. And if you did draft him, probably going 5th round.
And Brett, you had mentioned, when we're sort of comparing these IDP players to their offensive counterparts, that is something we've discussed. It is easier when you don't have 3 guys trying to draft for 4 teams each or something. But if we can find some people to do a live draft with us, like you see all the time for those offensive things where we have the IDP players included, that is something we're hoping to do once the draft is concluded, because it's sort of a exercise in futility a bit to do it with the IDP guys thrown in there before you have any idea landing spots.
It does make it very difficult, but it's for sure on the plans and our hopes and our dreams. But for tonight, those are on hold. We put a pin in it. The show's over. That's it, folks. Those are your tiers. As always, we do appreciate you guys hanging out. Those that have stopped by and visited, whether for long or short, we do appreciate you guys and love the conversations in the community. If you need us, rotoheat.com, you can find the IDP rankings in depth, not just the top 15, 16 guys. You can see all of them. We also have all of our IDP articles here on YouTube. If you're watching via YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification icon. You can stay up to date when we are live, because we are live 3 nights a week now in the off season. As always, if you like it, like it. If you're listening to it as a podcast, leave a rating and review. We do appreciate that as well. It lets the algorithms know that you appreciate our content. We thank you guys. We will be back here again next week at 9:30, but also make sure you jump on tomorrow night at 9:30 and watch the Dynasty Heat Seekers. Thursday night, I'll be talking Devy with Dez again. We'll see you guys later.